We're going to go ahead and get started, Kimberly, if you're ready, because we've got a lot of things to share with you this morning. And now that we're in the same place together and we can be heard and seen, we're going to roll. So whenever you're ready, Miss Kimberly.
All right, let's go.
So my name is Kim Rakedahl, and I am the supervisor for secondary school counseling at OSPI. I will be one of your co-pilots this morning on this wild plane ride that we are on together.
And I'm Kimberly Hetrick. I work at ESD 114. I'm the Career Connected Learning Coordinator. In the chat, you will see a copy of the presentation. Also, at the end of the presentation, we will be asking if you'll take just a few minutes and answer a couple of Google form questions for us. Let us know if you have any problems accessing the presentation.
All right. So just a few quick things. This was our normal screen that we use when we're in webinars. And so not knowing exactly for sure if you can actually mute yourself or unmute yourself, I'm going to assume you're muted. You're going to get the slides in the chat multiple times. Kimberly has already dropped the Google link in twice, and we'll continue to do that as folks join as we go. And then please feel free to use the chat box to post questions or provide any responses to our prompts, as that appears to be our main way of communicating with you in this Hopin app. And for today, we have a lot of things we're going to share with you, but we're going to start by acknowledging that we are Zooming to you today from the ancestral lands upon which we currently reside. For me, I am coming to you today from the intersection of the Nisqually and Squaxin Island tribes' ancestral lands. And I just offer up this slide as an opportunity to recognize the many, many, many generations of stewardship and care for the land that our Native folks and Indigenous tribes have provided, and to thank them for their work in that space, and to also encourage you, if you in any way are interested in developing a land acknowledgement in your district or your school or your area, the links on this slide, which will be live when you download them, will take you to some of the resources that OSPI provides so that you can find out which tribes are in your local area. And then we just encourage you to really work with them in consultation to develop any kind of land acknowledgement statement. And then today we're going to be talking about hope and high school and beyond plans, and how to increase student engagement and build relationships with them using that vehicle. And so we'll talk about the ways in which that hope is a science and not just a wish, and that it can actively support you and your students that you serve in building that pathway to their future. How we can use the data and the system of a high school and beyond plan to increase that engagement and really make those connections and build opportunities for our students so that they can be prepared to go on to a post-secondary goal of their choice and interest. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for some questions and feedback here at the end. And with that, Miss Kimberly, it's you.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being patient with us and the technology today. I'm going to be talking about hope. And as Kim said, it is a science, and it really is important to us in education, as we all know. So hope is defined as the belief that tomorrow will be better than today. And most importantly, you have the power to make it so. So we're going to talk about the what, the high school and beyond plan, and the why, which is the hope. Hope is the underlying element in the foundation of the high school and beyond plan. Does how you view the world influence your actions? For high hope people, barriers become opportunities and pathways. High hope people believe the future will be better. They have the power to make it so, that there are many pathways to their goals, and that no pathway is free of obstacles. So hope theory has three elements: agency, pathway, and goal. Hope theory is actually rooted in the positive psychology movement, which began about 20 years ago. Some of you may recognize leaders in positive psychology like Martin Seligman and Sean Anker. This revelation of developing what was right rather than fixating on what was wrong was the work of Dr. Seligman. He believed that we should teach our children and ourselves to look at our strengths rather than our weaknesses. Such movements have influenced other scientists such as Carol Dweck and her fixed versus growth mindset theories in science. Hope theory states that there are three elements: a goal, agency, and pathway. For the purposes of our presentation today, High School and Beyond Plan is the plan and the goal that we wish to achieve. As we go through the presentation today, you will note that Hope Theory and the High School and Beyond Plan share a common language. Some of the words you'll hear a lot are agency and pathway. So hope is a huge contributor to our overall well-being, and it's the best predictor of our future health outcomes. It also has to do with how we do in education, mental health, physical health work, and of course, the criminal justice system. Those that are highly hopeful tend to not land in the criminal justice system. So we're going to talk today about how we can help our students find hope. One of the ways you can do that with students is you can share the science of hope. You can help students understand that their behavior is goal-oriented, and you can help them reframe life experiences in the context of hope. So we talked earlier about how hope is a belief that tomorrow will be better and you have that power. Hopeful individuals identify one or more pathways towards the goal, and they can focus their agency or their willpower toward those goals and the pathways. So we talk about goals. Goals have an end purpose. They can be short or long term, and they must be of sufficient value to change our behavior. Pathways. They are mental roadmaps to reaching our goals. They help us to see what potential barriers we might have to attend to and how we might be able to overcome them. Willpower or agency is the mental energy to your pathway and pursuits. We have to talk with our students about how to regulate thoughts, emotion, and behavior. And we then help them focus their attention and intention on their pursuits. The three elements, again, of hope theory: agency, the willpower to do something, the pathway to get there, and the goal that you wish to accomplish. So we as educators want to help students dream. Before we do that, we need to remember that we have to take care of ourselves. And in order to help our students, we need to attention our self-care. And this is really important in the past year and a half of COVID, to balance all of our personal needs as well as the needs of our students. So with hope begets hope. So first, you have to have a goal. How do you help your students dream? How do you help them look forward in their world? How do you communicate to students what they are capable of achieving? You help them by visioning. Visioning builds motivation. Motivation is connected to our experiences and our emotions. Visioning is powerful. And when you have high expectations for a student, you are communicating to them that you have a vision for their future and you believe it is possible. Pathway thinking. These are mental roadmaps to the goal. Again, we can identify what potential barriers that will be in our way, and how we can overcome them. We will also consider having multiple pathways. So when we think about the high school and beyond plan, this might be a student might want a pathway towards college, trade school, the military, etc. And it's our job to help them build that plan and help them get there. We also, for those of us that have had high school students, know that many want to be professional football players, soccer players, actors, and actresses. So that is a goal, but we might want to encourage them, again, to have multiple pathways, because the chances of all of our students becoming professional athletes or actors and actresses is pretty slim. This is where we start looking at our growth mindset as well. We need to have empathy. It all starts with building connections with our students. And your role as an educator is to build that connection and help them grow their hope skills. And then the agency. This is the mental energy that you need to use to get to your pathway. And when we talk about agency, there's a lot that is out there about brain research, which I will not have the time to go into today, but I do encourage you to listen to the podcast. That's a resource at the end of this presentation. Agency is very much based in SEL, social emotional learning. And I'm not going to go into all of this, as most of you are probably aware of it, but I just wanted to make that connection for you. And agency is also very rooted in executive function. Hope is a skill set, and it's important that we teach our kids to regulate. Hope requires students to have the skills to envision a positive future, and this activates their agency. Students need resilience, self-worth, and ability to envision a positive future. Other factors we might talk about are motivation, grit, sense of self-worth. In the presentation, this GOOP worksheet is linked. It is a goal-setting worksheet, and then on the right-hand side is a hope worksheet. Those are available for you in the presentation. This is just a tool for you to use with your students. We know that hope highly correlates to academic achievement with regards to higher test scores, GPA, prediction of going and persisting in college, and getting higher grades. Hope can be measured. There are actually hope scales for adults and for students, and they're referenced here if you wish to go into that further. Steps to enhancing hope in students. First, we help them measure. We try to identify what their hope level is. Then we teach our students about hope, help them understand what hope theory is and how it will be important throughout their life. And then we structure the hope for the students, and we give them activities such as the High School and Beyond plan to work and practice their hope skills. We create positive and very specific goals. The SMART goals that many of us teach in class would be an example of that. We have to practice, practice, and practice. Our hope skill set needs to be practiced and modeled constantly. We want to maintain our connection and keep checking in with our students, helping them overcome their obstacles and identifying their challenges and helping them figure out how to overcome them. And I always like that sometimes when students haven't accomplished something, they're not proficient, we always like to use that word yet. We haven't reached that goal yet. And then you continue to review and you continue to go back over what is hope theory and how it applies to life. I'm going to quickly go through the next slides because I just want you to realize it is out there. We measure hope in our state. Actually, they have added, in the youth risk survey, they have added hope questions. And this is just a slide that shows that overall our students in our state are 49% hopeful. But it highly correlates to some of our other mental health issues. So there's a strong correlation between hope and anxiety. So here you'll see this is 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade. Students that are highly hopeful are less anxious all the way across the board. Same too with depression. Our highly hopeful students are going to be less depressed. And same with suicide ideation. Hopefulness and suicide ideation strongly correlate. So when we talk about hope, we set goals, we envision pathways, we create a future picture, and that leads us to hope. Hope is the foundation of a successful and engaging high school and beyond process. At the heart of change is your ability to understand the way things are and to imagine the way things could be. The future will be better, and you will have the power to make it so. So with this, I'm going to stop sharing, unless I'm going to call on Kim to present her part of the presentation, unless you need me to do it, Kim. I wasn't sure. You okay? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Just making the transition with all the buttons.
Okay.
As you probably all have picked up on, this was a new platform for many of us, Kimberly and I included. And so we are just so happy to both be in the same room with you, being heard and being present with you today. So thank you for making time to be here. And Kimberly just did the most speed round version of hope science and hope theory that I think I've ever seen. That presentation has so much meat to it and so many nuggets of important aspects of our consideration of engaging and re-engaging with our students as we bring them back to school this fall. Some who have been gone for the past year, some who have been present, but in a hybrid situation, and some who really didn't have much change. But it's still another year and new students, and always an opportunity for us to rethink how we can engage students better, differently, in a way that meets their unique needs. So we're going to talk a little bit now and shift the conversation a little bit around how the high school and beyond plan is really more than just a checkbox for graduation, that really the intent of this graduation requirement is to provide a structure and a framework for annual guidance and support, annual career and college exploration and preparation, and engagement with your families, your students, your staff, your communities. There is so much potential in this tool to really enhance and engage students differently and empower them in a way to take ownership of their learning and their preparation for whatever it is they choose to do when they leave our K-12 system. And in case you haven't figured this out or you haven't heard me speak before, it is a huge passion area of mine to help elevate this framework into something that really becomes systemic throughout an entire school and a district as a way to guide our students through the many, many layers of requirements and opportunities that we can provide for them in our school system. So with that, assuming I can get this to go, always like to ground the conversation around high school and beyond plan in a why, because I really think it's important when we have so much coming at us all the time as educators that we really think about the why of what we're doing, because that can help us with the how and the what pieces, but also just that feeling of constant overwhelmingness with everything that we need to do in a given school year. So there's two whys I want to share with you. One is sort of the why, some of the whys around the high school and beyond plan itself. And so you can see on your screen, this is a former ACTE National Executive Director, Janet Brady. It's adapted from some of her work. some of the reasons why having a guidance and support framework for students is so important, because we know the high school diploma really is no longer enough to get them prepared for family wage jobs that can lead to that economic security and that ability for them to engage in their life the way they may want to. And we see that global shift from industrial to a knowledge economy is really impacting the ways in which students can choose to prepare for a career after high school, because while we certainly see a need still, about a third of all jobs require a bachelor's degree or higher, there's still about a third or so, a growing sector of our economy that you can prepare for in a 2-year degree, a credential, an apprenticeship, some other way than that baccalaureate and higher degree that might fit some of the interests and skills and needs of our students better, and still lead them to those, high skill, high wage, high demand careers that we know are growing in certain sectors of our economy. And we also know, as the data shows us often, that having some level of post-high school education or credential certainly helps when our economic downturns happen and we see job loss. That those folks who have invested in their education and training tend to be more apt to keep their current position. And then when we think about hope and kind of some of the whys around building hope in students through the high school and beyond plan is so important. We are still seeing way too many students dropping out of high school. We know that there are way too many of our young adults either not in school or not working, not engaging in our economy. And if you've ever seen some of my colleagues from OSPI present around our students with disabilities and the outcomes we see for that population 1 year after high school, they're as high as 25 or 30% of those students who are experiencing disabilities who are not engaged in a meaningful way. And our economy would completely collapse if that was the case for every student. We had that high of a percentage. And so we still see those disparities in the information and knowing that certain populations of students are not achieving at the same rate as their peers. And so giving every student the same guidance and support is really key in increasing the equity of our outcomes and making sure that our students are having their needs met in whatever unique ways they may have them. And we know that we want to see these metrics improving in terms of reasonable engagement after high school in some kind of education or training to move them forward, so that our employers are also receiving graduates who have the skills that they need so they can get them going and moving forward right away. So that's some of our why. And again, for those of you who aren't data nerds like me and don't like stats, there are human faces and kids' names behind those numbers. I'm sure you can think of them in your head if you take a moment and pause. But really, that's what we're here for, is helping each and every student build a meaningful pathway through their middle and high school experience and leaving us ready for that first step after high school. So one of the ways we frame that in the state of Washington is obviously with our graduation requirements. There have been many changes over the last decade or so as we have come in and out of different state assessments, and we have built different degrees of increased credit expectations. And now we see this big shift from House Bill 1599 that passed in 2019 away from that moment in time assessment as a gauge of a student's preparation and towards building of graduation pathways, many of which are still pointing students towards that 2- and 4-year college route. But we are seeing obviously some other options within those graduation pathways to prepare students for the military, for technical careers and technical college programs, for the trades, for apprenticeship. And we know the State Board of Ed is continuing to collect information on what graduation pathways are still missing that we might continue to build out options that will continue to support different students' needs as they prepare for that post-high school goal of their choosing. So I'm going to just cover this a little bit briefly in the sense of how these 3 graduation requirements kind of intertwine and interconnect to really help prepare our students for that first meaningful step after high school. So what you see on your screen is actually a State Board of Education graphic, and it's got a couple different pieces of information here that are really important as we think about guiding students through their credit requirements. The ones in yellow on the left are considered the core or foundational credits that we know outside of the graduation requirement emergency waiver from the COVID impacts we've been experiencing. Those are typically the 17 credits we know students need to pass in some form. It can be through regular instruction in a traditional classroom. It can be through alternative learning experiences or online. It can be through mastery-based learning or competency-based education. So lots of ways to meet those 17 credits, but something in the fashion of those names and boxes you see on the screen must be completed. On the right-hand side are our 7 flexible or elective credits, which include the 4 electives, which are free and clear for students to make choices about. And then those 3 personalized pathway credits, the 2nd credit of fine art and the 2 credits of world language, which, you know, the legislature and education advocates believed were important opportunities for students to explore those educational areas and gain some skills and some confidence in speaking a second language and delving into the arts. But if a student has a plan for after high school that could be better served by some additional courses in another area, they can have some flexibility with those 3 credits to choose differently. And one of the things I always like to point out in terms of those students who really are kinesthetic, hands-on learners, who like the trades and the apprenticeship routes, who are really into working hands-on, they can essentially build a third of their classes as CTE-based programming, assuming they have access in their school, with the 1 credit of CTE that's required and these 7 flexible credits. And that's not even taking into account any of the potential courses that may be in your school that are CTE equivalencies for some of the core or foundational credits that are on the left side of your screen. So lots of ways we can think about meeting students' needs and really helping them build an academic plan that can guide them into preparing for something of interest and have enough flexibility for them to change their mind along the way. I have a current soon-to-be sophomore and senior in high school, and so I know from firsthand experience very intimately that they do not always know what they want to do tomorrow, much less 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, and that their interests do change regularly and often. So the flexibility that's inherent within this 24 credit diploma framework really is part of the advising and the guidance that needs to happen through this high school and beyond plan process so that students are aware of what their options are to meet their requirements and also how those can shift with their changing interests to still meet the credit requirements but move them in a new direction if they choose. So that's where the graduation pathways come in. As my visual brain works, I work in pictures much more than I do in auditory. And so this to me feels a lot like what the graduation pathways process might feel like to students in terms of being on a highway and then opting to take an off-ramp and try a different route, and then you get there and you decide, nope, I'm going to get back on that freeway. So lots of different ways we can think about supporting students in navigating through those on-ramps and off-ramps and, you know, speed bumps and roadblocks and different things that can potentially keep them from a straight and narrow path that they may have thought they wanted to be on, and also provide them that chance to rediscover that path if they get off track a little bit. So lots of ways to think about the pathways. And again, this bill 1599, when it passed in 2019, was probably one of the first times in my 12 or so years of being around the legislature that I heard them really openly acknowledge that they would need to revisit this idea of graduation pathway and potentially add more options, that this was a starting point, but not the ending point for our system to really think about how students can demonstrate their preparation for post-high school and secondary goals, and how we as the adults in the system need to help guide them to those different options. So when we think about graduation pathways, some of the language from the bill that I think is really important for us to keep front and center in our mind as we're working with our students is that these pathways are designed to provide students with options to demonstrating the preparation for the goal they have articulated in their high school and beyond plan. So again, that high school and beyond plan framework has become increasingly relied upon from the legislative standpoint anyway, as sort of this guidance and support framework for all of secondary ed, so that we can continue to give students access to what are they thinking about who they are, what are they thinking about what they want to do for a living and who they might want to become, and then how do they become that? So these pathways are part of the way that the high school and beyond plan is structured into these 3 guiding questions. And please note the arrows on this graphic. It was intentional that I picked this one because really the very first question and most important question we should be asking students to consider is who they are as a person, what they value, what their interests are, what their skills are that they have, what skills they want to develop, what do they have as goals for their life, who do they want to become? Because that question of what do you want to be when you grow up is an intimidating question. It's a hard question for them to answer at 14, 16, even 18 years old. But they may have some stronger feelings about who they might want to be as a person, how they want to show themselves to the world, how they want to interact in their environment, what they value and care about. Those are things that we would hope students would be able to articulate. And yet it's not like that's a common topic in any class that we tend to take in high school, except maybe psychology, which I taught. And we did involve, our own self-esteem and self-image and thoughts in that class. But really thinking about who am I? What do I care about? What do I want for myself? What do I want to develop in myself as a person, right? And Nancy, that's a fabulous comment. I am getting there, so thank you for beating me to the punch. But when we talk with students about what can I become, I love Nancy's response in the chat, because that's where I landed as well as I did this work for 17 years, is asking students, what do you want to do first? Right? We really, as a K-12 system, can only point them towards that first step after they leave us. And so that's really how we've got to frame this. So Nancy, I love that you articulated that in the chat. That really is a key part of how we message to students that yes, it's important to prepare. And yes, the things you do in high school and middle school are moving you in a direction, but it's moving you in a direction of what you're going to do first, right? And as long as we adopt that idea of being lifelong learners, that we can always go back and get more education and training if we have the means or can find the means to do so, to make those changes in our life. Used to share with my students that, the average number of different careers that people are engaging in now, and this was back 5 or 6 years ago, is 7 different things that we might choose to do, because that, previous generation, couple generations ago, who would go to work in a single environment and work there 35, 40 years and, retire, is not certainly the norm in this information economy the way it was in our industrial economy. So thank you, Nancy. And then the final question that we want students wrestling with and exploring and really making their course choices aligned with is this idea of how do I become what I think I might want to do first? Because when they walk in our door at the high school level as freshmen and they raise their hand that, yes, I want to go to college when I ask that question, but then they have no idea why, that's a problem. We need to help them make those connections and ask themselves the first question about who am I and what do I care about? How does that potentially align with potential jobs? And then what training and education do I need to do to get there? It's also really key because we know that the student debt rate has now outpaced our housing debt in this country. We're in the trillions in student debt. And if students aren't making those choices of leading to those post-secondary educational outcomes that are worth the investment, assuming they're going into those careers where they have potential for a future in that space, that it isn't a career area where we're seeing downtrends in our data and where we're seeing less need, then that can be a worthwhile investment for sure. But many, many students don't necessarily need to make as heavy of an investment in their education and training as they think they do if they get accurate guidance and support in figuring out these questions. So what I have for you here, and this is just a really simplified overview of what a potential scope and sequence might look like if we were going to really use our middle school and high school years to dive into different components of the high school and beyond plan each year, and how we can make it so that it doesn't feel completely duplicative every year, that we're focusing on some different aspects that are relevant for the timeline or the time period in which the students are in. So my ideal example for that is the resume that students need to complete by the time they graduate. When I was at Olympia High School, I worked with our 10th grade English teachers, and they actually took on resume writing as a technical writing assignment in their classrooms because it aligned with their learning standards. They took that over. We spent 2 years of me doing train the trainer. And then it was a whole school investment in one of the aspects of our high school and beyond plan that was really timely for students because they turned 16 in their sophomore year typically, which means they might be getting that first job. They might be getting that first car. And so they were engaged in it at that time in their life because they saw benefit and meaning for that taking place for them in that classroom. And so wherever we can find those kinds of relevant touch points for some of the aspects of the high school and beyond plan components that need to be done, that's a win, right? And obviously at a bare minimum, every year prior to that registration process for our next year's classes, some kind of exploration and preparation pieces should be done around how their course decisions are aligning them with their post-high school goals so that they're making those course choices as best as they can with what access they have to align them with their goals. So this is just a sample of how you could look at ways to parcel out the different parts that need to be completed in a high school and beyond plan and make this a meaningful annual process for students rather than just that, oh, I got to get this done and check the box to graduate. So kind of making it that whole guidance framework. And we do have in the upper right-hand corner a link for you to the Career Guidance Washington lesson plans that were created years ago. We're getting ready to hopefully update those this coming year with some of our ESSER funds at OSPI that we have access to. And so this is 30 lessons per grade level, 6 through 12, that are in Word documents. So you can cherry pick whatever parts work for your system in your school, use whatever is helpful, leave the rest alone, but they are there, they're free, and they are aligned with state standards from 5 years ago. We're getting ready to align them to the state requirements and standards that have been passed in the last couple of years. So look for those to be updated hopefully by the end of this next school year. And then when it comes to delivery strategies for high school and beyond planning, we did a 9-year College Spark Foundation funded grant program at OSPI about 7 or 8 years ago that really provided schools with support for running an advisory or a homeroom system in which every staff member was tasked with advising and supporting a small group of students through their high school and beyond plan using those Career Guidance Washington lessons. And what you're seeing on the screen are some of the ways we know that the high school and beyond plan does get delivered in schools. We often see our school counselors or our career specialists taking the lead in those spaces because, of course, that's more their background. And they do have some of that inherent knowledge that they can pass on to students without maybe nearly as much preparation as a whole staff approach. But when we did this grant-funded program and really got whole staff buy-in across entire middle and high schools and provided them the supports and the training they needed to help really use what was in the high school and beyond plan to build relationships and connect students to opportunities, that's where we saw the biggest gains and changes in all student groups' ability to be ready to move on to any post-secondary goal, especially the four-year college readiness. We saw huge increases for Native American populations and other student groups who have been historically underrepresented in those pathways, saw huge differences. We also, again, look for ways where some of these components might be embedded in an existing class as a way to, again, engage students in a different environment than just an advisor or homeroom or just with their school counseling and career center staff. And so you see some examples on the screen of places where some of the components have been embedded in other classes as a way to again, increase staff connection to and support for this process. And when it comes to student engagement, I love this graphic, and I really feel like it's a chicken and egg situation, because ultimately for students to really engage in a high school and beyond plan, they need to know that the time they're spending to put information into it and to do the activities and to save their careers and save their potential colleges or military branches that they're interested in, that like something means something from that, right? That what is that doing for me other than I'm typing stuff in or I'm pushing buttons on my platform? And so when we think about engagement of students in this process, obviously there are some things we can observe outside of them in their academic progress and their behavior, but also internally, how might we look for ways to increase their internal engagement with this? They're wanting to do these processes and these activities because they see the benefit to them, and it helps to connect them to their school, to their peers, to their future. So first things first is the high school and beyond plan is supposed to now be delivered through an online option. And the reason for that is because it absolutely has the potential to increase the use of the high school and beyond plan as a tool to build relationships, to build hope, to build connections for students both in and outside of the school. And so when we think about some of the things that students save in their high school and beyond plan, if I had more time, I'd ask you this question and we'd have conversation. But there's several things that they have to put in their high school and beyond plan that if staff were trained on accessing this information, could use to start really building those relationships and those connections in the classroom. They can use it to tie students to activities and supports that come through the Career Center, the Counseling Center, through the ASB office, and the activities that you may offer in your school through clubs and CTSOs. So there's all these ways in which we could potentially use what students put in their high school and beyond plan, which is one of the most untapped sources of student voice I think we have in the whole system, to benefit them. So let me give you a couple of examples, because I had the benefit of working with a colleague who was a former marketing teacher, and she taught me some opportunities that I could really dive into to engage students in using their high school and beyond plan. So for example, students who save colleges. Obviously, this last year, it was virtual tours. So I would potentially find out that WSU, Go Cougs, was having their virtual tour coming up the next month. I could send an email or a note. If you have push notifications or text messages, even better. But something to all the students who had saved that college to say, hey, here's when this virtual tour is occurring, or hey, here's when that college rep is coming down to the Career Center to visit. Use this as your pass out of class. You're getting this notice because you saved WSU in your high school and beyond plan. Similarly, this is one that always really got them thinking and reacting in interesting ways. As I watched these be delivered in the classroom, I would print one-sided copies of $100 bills, so it was not counterfeit attempt, I swear. And I would put the note on the back that says, hey, you're receiving this scholarship or maybe internship information because you had this goal in your high school and beyond plan, and, you know, contact me if you have questions or need help with the application. And I've watched them receive this, you know, cut out $100 bill and do this kind of like, whoa, what the heck? And turn it over and see the note and go, oh, okay. And then a few times in my career, I would get calls from parents that night saying, why did my student not get this information? They also are interested in, you know, engineering or whatever it was. And it was such a great opportunity for me to open up a dialogue with that parent about their student needing to use their high school and beyond plan in a way that was meaningful by putting information in so that I could use it to help them. So again, that increasing of engagement for students, but also sometimes their families, as they would bring these things home, or parents would find them in their backpacks and then contact me and want to know more. Now, obviously, high school and beyond plan data access varies by your platform, and it varies sometimes by your district procedures and policies. So you do want to really work with your administration and your district office to figure out what data do you have access to, what does your platform do for you in terms of data mining and running reports and gathering information. And then think about how can you use what you have access to in ways that can really benefit students and connect them to field trips once we get to do them again, or guest speakers that are coming in, or career launch activities that are in your area. And then what data do you wish you had that you don't have access to? And can you get to it? You just don't have permission? Or does it maybe necessitate an examination of another platform or other opportunities or ways to engage in different tools that can get you access to the data that you want and need to really build these connections for your students? So getting staff connected, here are some of the strategies that we know have really benefited our educators in being able to build those relationships and those connections with their students. So using what's in their high school and beyond plan to know how do they learn, what are interests that they have. Obviously, there's other pieces of data around grades and attendance and different things you can use to build those sort of encapsulations of a student and how they might interact with peers in groups. You can talk with students about their course choices. I know our staff who are connected to the arts and electives and CTE often do this regularly, in part to market their programs and to get students to continue building those skills and progressing in the areas that they may have interest or aptitude. And then, of course, these can be good ways to talk with parents if a student is struggling, to say, your student is saving colleges, but they're getting a D in my class. How can we help them? Because this isn't going to get them prepared for what they want to do. And really building those relationships and looking for ways to inspire and engage our kids outside of teaching our content. And then families, great opportunity to engage families with student-led conferences specifically. So this was another strategy that came out of that 9-year grant-funded program that I talked about earlier, where the high school and beyond plan and the career guidance Washington lessons and an advisory system using student-led conferences made huge differences for students in terms of their ability to engage in any of the post-secondary options. They had done the work to be prepared for any option. And having run student-led conferences myself and also participated in them with my own children, I can tell you unequivocally that it is the best way to get students to really have to think about the progress that they are making and the goals that they have and how they might want or need to make changes to get to the direction they want to head, and to be able to own that with their families and their teacher. Being able to show the high school and beyond plan platform at parent nights, showing quick little videos that are out there by the Ready WA group. They have a whole high school and beyond plan suite of resources that are really great, one-pagers, technical, condensed, really graphically, visually appealing types of resources. And then sharing updates in any school newsletters or emails or on social media. Our Gear Up folks have really great family newsletters, monthly versions of them that you can pick from and choose to send out some of that information. And then really our parents can be a super, super untapped repository of career speakers, workplace tours, connections for mentoring, job shadowing, providing panels of like mock interviews for jobs, all kinds of things that we can use our parents to engage in to help boost our supply of bodies to do this work with our students and engage them in a meaningful way where their expertise can be valued and honored as well. And then I wanted to link you to a report that the Puget Sound Career and College Network did a couple years ago using with SIPSE's Skyward version of the high school and beyond plan, and really delving into some of the systems level supports that need to be in place for this to become a really secondary middle to high school process of guidance, engagement, and support. And so this report has some really great ways of thinking about the different components of a system of support instead of just a random act of guidance every year. And I wanted to connect you to that for future reflection and opportunity to look into it, because we just don't have time to delve into it today. But it is a great way to think about how you might structure things at the district or building level to help you build that system of support and guidance for students, which is really in line with the new requirement from Senate Bill 5030 to build in comprehensive school counseling programs using best practices from our national and state standards. So more information will be coming on that this year as we support your districts in doing that work as well. And the High School and Beyond Plan is just one component of that you're already doing, but we might think of ways together to help you do it more robustly and intentionally and systemically. So when it comes to this fall, just again, thinking about helping those students really come back into an engaged environment where adults are ready to help them figure out, how do I pick up from where I am here and keep moving forward to build that hope for their future, use the High School and Beyond Plan as a tool to really guide them through what are the classes we need to potentially, complete or make up, what are the ways in which we can continue to connect you to opportunities to explore and prepare for your future. And then just encourage you to think about what are some ideas you want to bring back from this particular presentation to share with your colleagues, to share with your administrators, to share with your school district, to look at K-12, because we don't want to forget that our elementary folks are building the foundation of social emotional skills and content awareness and basic educational skills that are going to transition in that secondary level to the career and college readiness and academic supports and skills that we know our students are going to need to get ready and prepared for what they want to do when they leave us. And I encourage you to really think about how to elevate that student and staff and family voice in this process so that everybody's connected to it and it becomes a systemic approach from the whole school. So we actually finished a few minutes early, Kimberly. I can't believe it. I'm so impressed with both of us, because if you've heard me speak before, I love to talk with you. So we do have this Google survey, which I think you have put that link in the chat if you want to drop that in again. We have to do this again tomorrow. So if there is any way you could spend a few moments filling out this Google form for us, it's just 5 quick questions to give us a little bit of feedback on how this came over the interweb waves to you, and what we might do better both tomorrow and as we adjust this to go into the WACD conference next month. Would love your feedback. And with that, I think, do we have some opportunity for questions? And here's our contact information if you want to reach out to us.
I did like Matt's comment about the student. I want to call attention to that. He talked about one of his students that did not respond well to into the Zoom learning. And that he said this student is a very skilled artist. And the question was, are there some students that teachers should look at as needing to go into trade instead of continuing with higher ed? And as a former CTE teacher, I love that question, because some of my greatest successes as a teacher were just that, the students that actually started working in high school in different apprenticeship type roles and went on to have very, very fruitful careers, making a lot more money than I will ever see in my entire life. One of my students actually was on the verge of going into youth detention, and we got him a job at Toyota. And he ended up becoming a master Toyota technician and was off. So love that question. It's not a college for all mentality anymore, folks. And we need to be really aware of what our students' passions are and help them align that with their purpose in life.
I would also add to that we have to remember that college doesn't just mean four-year universities, that college is an inclusive term to mean technical schools, trade schools, specialty schools, community level colleges, junior colleges, and our four-year universities. So it's really a process of being able to engage in that continued learning. Also, almost forgot and wanted to make sure you knew that in this slide deck, we've connected you to a few resources that might be of assistance if you want to dive further into some of what we have covered today. OSPI basically did some market research a couple years ago because of House Bill 1599, and we put out a list of vendors that offer a high school and beyond plan option that is most aligned with the state of Washington's requirements. You don't have to use any of them. They just happen to be the ones we found to be most aligned. And then linked you to OSBI's High School and Beyond Plan template, which again is a Word document. So you can cut and paste and pick and choose and borrow and steal whatever parts of it you might need to supplement what you already do, if that is helpful. And Kimberly put in a resource here as well.
Yeah, it's a video that some of you may have seen, but it's called Success in the New Economy, and I'm going to add it into the presentation. If you haven't seen it, it is definitely worth the watch. It talks about stackable credentials and the importance of industry recognized credentials, and that having the trade skills is equally as important. So I'll add that into the back of our resources.
I am so glad they updated that, Kimberly, because I used to show the 2012 version of that video to my students as a way to set the stage for who is first, what is second, and then how you get there, what training and education you need is third, because you may not necessarily need as much time and energy and money spent in your post-high school education as you think. So I love that they updated that. I also linked you just to our High School and Beyond Plan template. The Class of 22 template will be coming soon, which will be updated with some new features to show alignment with IEP transition plans and to align with new requirements from the legislature in the last year. And so wanted to point out the financial aid options in particular, because that was new again as part of some of the recent legislation. And I had lots of questions about, do we have to create spreadsheets and basically check off every kid's name as having gotten this information? So what we created here for you was just an attestation page that students could attest and say they had received that information. So you weren't essentially tracking every little single bit of this on a spreadsheet, because that's not what you need to be spending your time doing. And then Kimberly, do you want to talk about these last two resources with our
Sure. I went through Hope Theory so fast because this was a very dense presentation and we had a lot to cover. But I encourage you to dig into it a little bit further and learn about it. I think it will be very helpful to train your students in the skill set and understanding the science of hope. And then the next slide I have is a podcast that also goes into more about how hope theory relates and how it can be really important in education. And the last one here I just added was Success in the New Economy. The next slide. I don't know if you have it.
Not coming up. I don't have it.
Okay,
Sorry.
I just added it, so you will have it when you refresh your link above, and it's the one that I referred to earlier. It talks about stackable credentials and CTE at college and trades. So it's worth the watch. And for the kindergarten teacher that was here today, I just love that you are here, because career development begins in kindergarten, and there's a whole theory around that about how we need to do things at age appropriate levels. But every year we should be doing something to move our students towards career thinking. So really glad to have you here.
Okay, and last but not least, again, putting into the chat one last time, the Google survey. If you could take a couple minutes when you get a break to give us your feedback so we can look at that prior to tomorrow and prior to our next run of something similar to this at the WACD conference in August. We would certainly value and appreciate your time in taking just a few minutes to give us your feedback. So thank you again.
Thank you. Hope to see you around in person one day.
Yeah, and here's our contact information last time.